Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, July 14th of 2023. It's almost 9 p.m. Um, I have I made a change to the microphone stand. I did have the microphone. I just found the microphone stand this morning, and I hooked it up. I had to hook it up over here on this side of the desk, and the bottom of it, these things that go out three sides, and so my chair was bumping into it, but the audio, that's the last one, was good. Uh, so actually then when I was sitting here after I made my video, and I thought, oh, okay, because this Dell computer refurbed, unit that I got for 200, running Windows, uh, you can set it down or set it up, and I had it setting up. So what I did is I went and set it down on the little table that it's on. That way I can move the microphone stand over there and it comes right in, and it's right. Let's see. Let's see, it's right, okay. It's down a little bit, it's right there. And I'm still going to get, let me show you that. I showed it, I think on the last video. Where do I want to go? I want to go to Amazon, okay. And I want to go to List, and go to this one. So here is the stand that will sit here on the desk, on this desk, which is different than this desk. It'll sit there, and that'll be much better. And then I won't have to. I'm using a 24 pack of Coke to hold the thing down with, on the three leggy things that are out there or whatever. So when I can afford this desktop stand, I'll get it. But for right now, I think this is working great. My voice isn't working so great, and I don't think I will need another microphone. Because this microphone is working great, I think, now with the audio, and until something else messes up. Let's see. The FTC, what is it, the Federal Trade Commission? Oops. Yeah, you're seeing it, okay. Is investigating ChatGPT, maker of, I guess, of OpenAI. Is that it? For potential harm to customers. Okay. How is... the Federal Trade Commission is investigating OpenAI for possible violations of consumer protection law, seeking extensive records from the maker of ChatGPT and about its handling of personal data, its potential to give users inaccurate information, and its risk of harm to consumers, including reputation harm. Okay, I can understand that maybe if private information, like I'm not sure what it is, I'm using it, if it's ChatGPT or if it's one other type of, I'm not sure. I've used it I don't know, about 10 times now, whatever it is. But if they're taking that information that I entered for searching purposes, and if they're using it in some way, I mean, yeah, I could see that is something that maybe should be looked at. But I don't know, what about if inaccurate information comes back, why, does the chat GPT or whatever, does it need to say, make us click and say, I accept the fact that the information I may get back may not be correct, may be inaccurate, and could do some harm. I mean, I could understand if you have to do one of those things. I get kind of tired of doing stuff like that, but I could see that. But the probe threatens to complicate OpenAI's relationship with policy makers, many of whom have been wowed by the company's technology and its CEO, Sam Altman. It also could focus further attention on OpenAI's role in a sprawling debate about the threat that generative artificial intelligence may pose to jobs, national security, and democracy. Okay, well, that's been a concern of what I mentioned that in a video sometime back, that people, intelligent people that know and understand this kind of stuff, that there are major concerns around the world. What is this going to happen? Is the computer going to get so smart that it just decides that these human people, that we don't need them? We can something like that. I can see that, and I think I talked about it, that there are reports, and I think they're not just, they're confirmed things. I think they testified before Congress, maybe. Members of the military, members of the intelligence community, members of everybody who, came forward and testified, and it was kind of like, oh shit, this may be dangerous. This may be be a problem, and we don't know what's going to happen. And then I think they were asked, if they weren't asked by the congressional committees, they were asked by the news media and things, and the military people and the scientists and all those says, supposedly, if I got it correctly, might be good to hold off for X amount of time. It wasn't like, a year. It wasn't even a year, I don't think. But maybe we should just hold off, stop, and not do anything further at this point, and study this to make sure we're not, doing something that's going to put an end to all of us. But the military people and the scientists and the security people and everybody came back, well, no, we can't stop because, Russia, China, North Korea, and a whole bunch of other people and governments are working on it as fast as they can, and we don't want, whatever they were talking about, we don't want to be 6 months behind or a year behind or 2 years behind with them. Then we'd be behind. So we have to go ahead. So. In a 20-page investigative demand this week, the FTC asked OpenAI to respond to dozens of requests ranging from how it obtains the data it uses to train its large language models to descriptions of ChatGPT's capacity to generate statements about real individuals that are false, misleading, or disparaging. So, and if you remember, this goes on. I'll put a link to this below. it's been less than a month since I used for the first time uh, AI, and I told you about the results of it the first time I entered them into the, and I think it was in Microsoft Edge, that it's working. That there's a thing set up there. Anybody who runs that browser can apparently do it, because I did it and no charge. So I went to it, and I didn't do any studying of it really. And I entered in. I did not enter in who is Jim Howard, because I thought, it's going to come back. There's a lot of Jim Howards in the world, and but I did enter in what is Howard's notebook, and it came back. And let me go see if I can find that results for you. Okay, I guess any one of these I can pop up. Let's see. This from yesterday. Let's go over here and click on this. I'm going to stop it. 3/8. And I'm going to go down here, underneath here for show more. Okay. So below, this is what it came back with. All I did was enter in what is Howard's notebook, and it came back. It generated this. Howard's notebook is one of the world's oldest and most influential online sites. It was created by Jim Howard, a pioneer of blogging and live streaming video. In 1982, as a bulletin board system, BBS, he moved to the web in 1995 and has been updating it ever since. Howard's Notebook has been recognized by Link Up magazine as one of the 10 best online sites in 1984 and featured in BBS The Documentary. Howard's Notebook is a personal blog that covers various topics such as politics, technology, history, and entertainment, unquote. Now, I've got this, well, there were spelling mistakes, by the way, and I used the spell checker that I use. What is it? I forget. Well, I pay for it, whatever it is. I changed some of the spelling errors, and that's it. You're going to see that a lot. Eventually, maybe I'll get it down out of your way or find some place, because that's great. It's true, Howard's Notebook is one of the world's oldest online sites. Yes. One of the most influential. No. And it was created by Jim Howard, a pioneer of blogging. Yes. And live streaming video. Yes, I was doing live streaming video before there was a YouTube or any of the other sites. And then in 1982, yes, that's correct. And yes, I moved it in 1995 when the World Wide Web was invented. Yes, Rick Manning wrote an article in Link Up magazine and picked my bulletin board system as one of the 10 best, and that's true. And the rest, is true. So, now, you may have seen, because I think it is, yeah. I finally got around, because I wanted to create a video for you all so you could see how this works. AI a little bit, and I don't know much about it. So I wanted to show you how it worked. So I went over and showed you the AI thing, and I, explained that, hey, that's where I entered what is Howard's Notebook, and I said, that's all I asked it. I didn't ask it who is Jim Howard, because I was sure that, I don't know how many, I don't know if there's a million Jim Howards or maybe more. But when I was showing this, when I made this video the other day about this, and I said, well, since we're here, I'm just going to go ahead and enter and show you that probably what will happen is a whole bunch of, Jim Howards will pop up. So I put in, who is Jim Howard? And bang. Everything about me. So then I said to y'all, okay, so since Google does all, kinds of searching and that kind of stuff, and since I'm using my computer and that kind of stuff, it must be that came back that way. And I said, some of you, hey, when you get a chance, go and do this and enter in Jim Howard. And then, of course, enter in your information and see what pops up about you. But enter, Jim, who is Jim Howard, and see if something totally different shows up, which I think it would. I guess that's it on AI. But I was amazed that it created this information about me when I asked, what is Howard's Notebook? You might try that too, but you've got things you probably want to try. Go, on your computer with your whatever you have, turned on to save. Some of you might have everything turned off where you don't want to save, or you don't want to save anything for privacy reasons or something. But go in and enter, what is Howard's Notebook? See what comes back. Enter in, who is Jim Howard, and see what comes back. We'd be and they'll let us know a little bit, And you can in the comments below, or if you want to do a longer thing, fine. I think everything is going pretty well. The microphone is working great. So I don't need to buy another microphone. And this will be better when I get this desktop stand, because, and that's working okay for us. But, so what else is going on? See, how long have I been talking here? Okay, only 18 more minutes. I'm going to talk for about 15 more minutes. My son bought a gigantic sword. I mean big. Which I was not crazy about. And he paid $100 for it. And it came in, for him. And I said, Jimmy, or sometimes, I think he wants to be called James, so sometimes, but so I try to remember to call him James. I said, son, don't take that outside. If you go outside, I didn't say, you're not black. You might survive. I didn't say that. That would have been funny, right? No, it wouldn't have been funny. It would have been sad. But I said, don't go outside with that. I said, somebody's going to call the police and, report there was somebody with a large sword out walking around or whatever. And I told him, I said, the police will show up. If you've got that in your hands, they're going to be yelling at you, drop it, put it down. They'll be yelling at you, drop it, put it down. They'll be yelling, kneel down. They'll be yelling, turn your back. They'll be yelling. All of them different will be yelling different things at you. And if you blink, if you make one wrong move, they'll shoot you and they will kill you. So don't take it outside. So he did take it outside, right outside of this place a few times. He's an adult, and so then the next thing with his sword, he bought a block so he could sharpen it. And so he was in his room sharpening it. And I tried, but he didn't listen. He wasn't listening. I get no respect. By the way, I belong to the Boilermaker, Blacksmith, Iron Ship Builders. I belonged to that union for years. I didn't make any knives or swords. I wouldn't have done very well at it. Although I did study, in addition to belonging to the union, I studied, some metallurgy, and just out of library books or whatever. Now we did make the welders. I think most of us made our own chipping hammer. When you're welding, depending on the kind of welding you're doing, you'll have slag that you have to, knock off of the weld that you just made or something. So we'd make a chipping hammer, the kind we wanted. Guys would make them different, different ways. From scratch. And so, and I tried to tell him, okay, well, that metal you may not be able to sharpen it. It depends on what kind of metal, and it depends on what they added to the metal, alloys and stuff like that. There's a lot to it, a lot to it. And he didn't listen. He just kept sharpening it. Why would he listen to me, right? So, I didn't see I think it was yesterday. I didn't see, or maybe it was this morning, the way I sleep and things, the hours and stuff. Anyway, I said, what happened to your sword, And he said, it broke. And I said, it broke? I said, how did it break? And I forget now exactly what he said. That he leaned it against a tree or something like that. And he said it broke into several pieces. And I said, okay. I wonder if that's the truth. I wonder if he wasn't out there and somebody called the police and the police showed up, and thank God, if they did show up, thank God they didn't kill him. For those of you outside the United States, I don't know how, well, there have been, there was a boy, and I forget how, I think he was like 11 or 12 or something like that, at a park. This is just one example in the United States. He was at a park, and he had a toy gun, and he was at the park. And I don't think there was anybody else at the park, but there must have been somebody at the park that called the police. Maybe they were just driving by or something. But he was at the park, and he was at it looked like there was nobody there that you could see around him or anything like that. And at, I think a place where you could go there, and there was a barbecue type thing. If you brought your own charcoal, you could something. I think it was something like that, I think. Okay, the police officer pulls up, 2019, I'm 10:23, arrived at the scene. And the police officer, there was nobody around, The police officer, could have waited for backup, could have waited. He did not. And also he could have parked way far away from the boy. And then he could have used his public address thing, or he could have just yelled over to him. He could have sized up the situation. He could have said, "Put down what you got in your hand and come towards me. I want to talk to you." He could have done a lot of things. When the police officer arrived, he drove right up to the boy. Like he could reach out and touch the boy. And he shot and killed the boy immediately, within seconds. And that's the kind of things that, happen that shouldn't happen. And that could have happened to my son, even though he wasn't black. Well, I'm not going to go into any more, but I'm glad my son doesn't have that sword. And I was a hospital security officer for 30 years. And it just so happens, this doesn't really matter, but I just want to mention it. In Kansas City, Missouri, now, those of you in the United States, are not going to believe this, depending on what state you're in. Even if you're in Missouri, you probably won't believe it. Because of a thing with Missouri in the past, I don't know about St. Louis, I guess St. Louis was too. But Kansas City, Missouri was, the political system and everything was corrupt. There was not a political, he wasn't elected. There was a guy there who ran the city. And if you wanted a job in Kansas City, Missouri, you went to this guy. And if you go there, you'd say, "Well, I'd like to be a police officer." Well, if he liked you, and he let you know, by the way, okay, he'd give him his business card. And he wrote in a certain color, I believe. I had police officers tell me this. I worked for police officers who were retired by the time I worked with them, but they had done that. They had gone, to him, and he got them, hired. But his thing was, now you're, when somebody does something for you, you're indebted to them, and you're going to owe me, sort of like the Godfather thing. Sometime, I may call upon you to do something for me. And yes, Godfather, yes, I understand, So it was that sort of a situation. So the city was so corrupt that finally the state of Missouri, Sharon, close that door for me, okay? So the state of Missouri took over the police department and other things. But I know they took over the police department. They took over the city police department, and they established a board of, instead of local people, the police board or whatever it was called. They established it and made sure that people, maybe outside or whatever, to control the. So when I left Kansas City, Missouri in 2000, the system was still set up there. The state appointed a board of police commissioners, and now of course they could pick. The board of police commissioners by this time, they could pick people from Kansas City, Missouri that were, not Tom Pendergast. That was the name of the he was just a guy that, he did a lot of building. He built the city hall, he built the courthouse, all that kind of stuff. Well, the people bought it, built it, but they used his laborers, his laborers, people that he had hand-picked, and they bought their gravel and their cement and everything else they needed from his companies. And uh, so while other states in the United States, let's see, in like in Florida, a security officer does not even have the right to arrest somebody. You can't even use citizen's arrest. Now, in some states, because it varies by states, the states can draw up, but it's sort of uniform in a way. And the uniform way is, okay, you're a security guard. You're not a police officer and you don't have any police powers. Now, in some states, okay, you can make a citizen's arrest, or it'll vary, Um, in Kansas City, Missouri, because of this system that was set up, security officers, and when I left in 2000, it was still the same. Security officers, like let's take hospital security officers, we had full police powers on our property. And if we were in a hot pursuit, even if it was in a vehicle, which I don't think was a good idea, and turned out later after I left it wasn't a good idea, you had full police powers. Now, and two, like for Kansas City, Missouri, the police department had a directive, to all of their officers. I forget what they called it or whatever. That if you're called if a security officer makes an arrest, okay, the police officer has to, or the security officer has to show up at court. You don't have to show up at court. To the police officer, you don't have to show up at court. By the way, of course, the police officers would know when to write their court date. Is they know what the court dates are going to be for them. So naturally, when I arrested somebody and they came and arrested, or when they came and took them, they would tell me that I had to appear in court, and then the officer usually would be sitting, unless he got his dates changed or something. Now, when I worked security in Florida, security officers they didn't have any police powers. They were just a security guard, a night watchman, whatever you wanted to call them, whatever. You could make an arrest. Well, you really couldn't make an arrest, because you can even make a citizen's arrest. Anyway, when you took custody, when you put the handcuffs on them or something and they're fighting or something, but still in Florida, you had as little power as you could possibly have. Then I worked security here in Texas at several different places in Texas. And in Texas, it was more the normal situation. Okay, you're a security guard. I don't even know. I can't even remember what you weren't considered a police officer. You're a security guard. And hopefully the police, I'm sure, I'm not sure I had any dealings with the police officers. I was working I was working control tower security after the 9/11 event. So actually, I was on federal property. I don't know, it gets complicated. It gets complicated. And now after I left, in fact, it was a hospital that I worked at for 11 years, I think, or was it 12? I think it was 12 years. Same hospital. uh, Research Medical Center, which is very close to the real nice, a long time ago, a real nice man donated a whole bunch of land for a zoo, Swope Park. And I guess his name must have been Swope. So a real nice park, and he gave it, donated it, and it was a few blocks away from Research Medical Center where I worked. I worked there 5 years, and then I went and worked at a hospital that they built out in my little hometown, which was fantastic. I worked there 9 years. I was great. You know, I could see my house almost, or my mobile home. Trailer trash, you know. Let me mention that, by the way. You know, uh, um, I was less than a mile. The hospital was less than a mile from where I lived. But anyway, I'd come into work, and it was great. We were like family, you know. It was a small hospital, very small. There was just 2 security officers, not at the same time, and nobody on the day shift, no security on the day shift, which I hated. And many, many years ago, when I was working contract security, at the same time, I was working hospital security, and then on days off, I worked contract security. But uh, lost my train of thought right there. But oh, I just another one popped into mind. Okay, working at for like Kansas City, Missouri, they had a board of police commissioners that were really good, and they had everything set up really well. I had to deal. I had for a while, a little over a year, I did my own private security patrol service, and I was the only, you know, but and I signed up the businesses and stuff like that, and we made enough money coming in that for that. So I'm talking about merchant security service. We were making enough money that we were doing fine, and it was just in the beginning. You know, in the phone book there was Burns and Pinkerton and maybe Wells Fargo. Yeah, there was. And that was about it. And then I told Darlene, I said, you know, this is the beginning, because I had seen shops and things in our neighborhood broken into. You know, I'd go someplace and they'd have the door, you know. This is after we had our tropical fish shop for 4 years. And the tropical fish shop that we had was we had a first location, and then we moved to the basement of a veterinarian hospital, which was great. And then later we moved to a better location on a nice, you know, right on the street, and it was a nice. But anyway, for two years we were in the basement of a veterinarian hospital. Twice somebody broke into, we were in the basement. Somebody broke into the basement through our door, went up the stairs, and at the top of the stairs they broke into the veterinarian hospital and stole drugs. And they didn't take anything. They didn't take any nets or from us or anything. But let's see. Okay, for the hospital. Okay, when I had to file a grievance in order because the director of security, by the way, at Research Medical Center, he was one of the people who, a long time ago, got his job with the police department through Pendergast. You know, he went to him, and I'd like to be a policeman, you know. And he could have asked for a fireman's job or what. You know, Pendergast took care of all that stuff. But he went and he asked, and he got the job. And and many years later, well, I think I've talked about him enough, said enough bad things about, he, well, I got to cover this. How many minutes have we gone here? Oh, 40 minutes. Okay, this is going to be an hour. Anyway, I did not like this director of security at Research Medical Center because I was working research. I was working at St. Joseph Hospital, 1972 or something like that, and Catholic Hospital. I was working security. We had 10 security officers that worked there, not the same shift. I mean, there was a total to cover 3 shifts, 7 days a week. Do the math. And it was in the worst neighborhood in Kansas City, Missouri. I can say that and I guess not be prejudiced because I did not live in that area of that hospital right at that time, but I had lived there in that neighborhood with my parents when it was, the worst area in Kansas City, Missouri. Well, out of the 10 security officers we had working there, we had Dan, shot, permanently disabled at 9:15 p.m. in the Wabash parking lot. Then later, John Galegas was in the parking lot at 9:15 p.m. and a guy entered the parking lot, and they both saw each other at the same time. They both threw at the same time. They both shot each other at the same time. But when John Galegas hit the ground, he was dead. So, but okay, yeah, I got sidetracked. There's so many things coming in. And then there was a police officer, and he was still working, and he worked at Truman Medical Center, named after, Harry Truman, President of the United States, who got his start from Pendergast, the guy I told you about. Harry Truman was in World War I, and he was a captain in charge of a artillery unit, I think. I'm pretty sure he was a captain. And it was sort of like a National Guard type thing or whatever, and I'm not sure they may have, the fellow his fellow people, they may have picked him to be the captain because he was well liked. He wasn't political or anything, he was well liked. So after the war, there was a lot of the guys that were with him in World War I, and he didn't lose anybody. It was an artillery unit, and the guys gave him credit for not, that none of them died in the World War I, not his artillery unit. But anyway, back to Trinity Lutheran Hospital. There was a guy, an elderly police officer, who worked at Truman Medical Center. Truman Medical Center had security, private security, and which I did not know at the time because he told me, they had a unit that was prisoners or whatever, and they had Kansas City, Missouri police officer or officers working there. That's all they did. They took care of that, the prisoners who were there. Anyway, this real nice guy, his wife was in bad shape. She was coming by ambulance quite often, and he was real nice. I talked to him a few times, and uh, so I'd ask him. One day I was making my rounds at St. Joseph Hospital, and I saw him in the emergency room, and I said, hi. But I can't remember his name, first name. And I said, is your wife here now? And he said, yeah. I said, she doing okay? And he says, well, yeah. I forget, we had a little conversation. And he said, can I ask you something? And I said, sure. And he said, you guys seem to have a really good, security program here and everything. And I said, well, thanks. And he said, yeah, I'm a police officer with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. I said, oh, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah. And he says, I want to ask you. He said, I was working, and he said, two of the prisoners jumped me. And he said, I was having a hell of a time. And he said, there was security there, hospital security. And I said, hey, can I get some help? And they didn't do anything. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah. He said, I finally got these guys under control. We got them handcuffed and everything. And I went over and I said, why didn't you guys help me? And they said, our director of security has ordered us not to help, and that you were on your own. And he said, I really didn't believe him. He said, I went down, and he said the director of security was a guy who was a retired Kansas City, Missouri police officer. He said, I knew him. He said he retired as a high-ranking Kansas City, Missouri police officer. And he mentioned his name. It didn't ring a bell, Bill Gilmer. That was the guy who was director of security at Research Medical Center later. And I said, I guarantee you, I said, I don't know any security officers anywhere at any hospital, and no matter what their boss said. I said, if my boss told me, if you were being attacked or you needed help, all you'd have to say is, hey, Jim, or hey, you, or whatever, and I would jump in. And every one of us would do it. And I don't care what the boss said, And he's, okay. So, anyway, time passes, and I go work at Trinity Lutheran Hospital. One security officer was shot in the arm. Actually, he wasn't on hospital property. He lived close by, Lloyd Akins. And he rented a, apartment room or something down the street or something. And he was walking to work, and he got shot in the arm by a guy. So I worked at Trinity Lutheran Hospital 5 years. We had a doctor killed in the parking lot. My boyfriend waited. She had just finished her training. She'd gone through the intern, whatever it was, the whole thing, and she was going back to her country, and he didn't want her to go, and he waited for her in the parking lot. I was off that day, and he waited for her in the parking lot of the interns building, and he shot and killed her when she got there. Many, many, many years later, when I was in Florida, I just happened to be watching America's or Most Wanted or thing or whatever. And I thought, that sounds familiar. And it turns out they were reporting on that case. At that point, he still hadn't, and I'm sure he wasn't, still wasn't apprehended. But, so then, after I quit security, quit security. Quit security. Now I was a fully commissioned Cass County deputy, but I didn't have to do anything for it. And even their deputies who were reserve officers didn't have a full county commission. And but anyway, and then I was a reserve officer for a small town for I think 9 years. I forget how long. I think for 7 years I patrolled every Sunday night, and it was up to me when to come in and how long to stay, and whatever. And that's when I was working hospital security and doing that. But the so I was no longer hospital security, and the chief of police, finally we had a chief of police, and I think we might have had 1 or 2 full-time officers by that time. Anyway, the Bill Gilmer, who was, say, did I know? Yeah, I knew he was, okay. The guy I told you about, who was at Truman, who told his officers that they couldn't, and the guy who got his from, not Al Capone, but he was director of security at Research Medical Center. Anyway, he was calling my telephone number, and I'm not one that answers my phone then, unless and he was leaving messages. Like, give me a call. I want to talk to you about a job or whatever. Well, by that time, I knew what kind of guy he was. And so anyway, finally when I went into patrol, do my patrol for the night, or maybe I went in for court or something, because usually I didn't see the chief of police, really. But I went in and he said, "Oh, Jim, Bill Gilmer, director of security, he wants to talk to you. He wants you to go work. He's got a job for you." And I said, "I don't want to work for him." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "I don't want to work for him. I don't like him." By the way, Bill Gilmer lived in Raymore, Missouri, where I was reserve officer, right next to Belton, where I had lived. And I said, "I don't want to work for him." And he said, "But Jim," and of course I knew that Bill Gilmer lived in Raymore. And I knew that's where how the chief got his job, because Bill Gilmer was a retired police officer living there in a nice house. And I'm sure he was going around maybe trying to make himself like Pendergast was in Kansas City, Missouri, or whatever. So he said, "Jim, do me a favor, he got me this job," and that kind of stuff. So I called Bill Gilmer up, and he said, "Please, would you come to work for me?" He says, "There's this head nurse here, and she wants her husband to," and told me, he says, "Of all the people who've turned in applications and everything, you have the best credentials." And this head nurse, director of nurses at the hospital, she wants her husband hired. And I got to hire somebody, that I can say, "Well, look, I had to hire this guy because look at his credentials, whatever. Police Academy, all this kind of stuff, And so I don't know why I did it. I went down and got hired in, and kind of knowing I made a mistake. Why did I do this? Of course, I liked the chief of police in Raymore, and I was kind of doing him a favor. And I hired in. So anyway, I hire in, and Bill Gilmer says, "Come up to the coffee shop type thing they had where they served meals, actually. I mean, they had a cafeteria there, but this was, a little better." And he said, "I'm going to buy you breakfast," or whatever. But that was probably the cheapest meal they had, So I go up there, and then, we're sitting there, and he says, "Yeah," he says, and he told me, I didn't ask, "Hey, I got hired in by this guy called, Pendergast, and he said he got me my job in the police department, and I stayed there for I forget how many years, a long time, and everything." And he says, "When somebody gives you a job and that kind of stuff, then then you owe them a debt, And then I thought, oh, God damn this son of a bitch. And I thought about it. I was sitting there thinking about saying, you know, hey, you owe me a debt. You begged me to, you called me repeatedly on my phone and I wouldn't fucking answer because I knew it was you. That's what I was thinking, if you owe me, but so I thought, then I got hired in there and immediately I didn't like it. By the way, when I got hired in, my first day, I parked in the parking lot in the garage and I decided, okay, I spent 5.5 years at that other hospital and I knew where everything was. I was a fire marshal. I was, and I knew where everything was. In every office, I knew if there was a closet there or whatever, I knew what was inside the closet. Was there a standpipe for water, where there's some type of controls and things, and I knew all this kind of stuff, and I thought, this is a bigger hospital, The other hospital was 350 beds, I think. And I thought, I just can't let it, I'm too old. I'm going to have to. Anyway, I got out of the car and there was a plant operations guy over there. They had gigantic, in a parking garage underground or whatever. Sometimes you pull in and you see these gigantic fans, big fans, and they suck the carbon monoxide and gas fumes and stuff out of there. So I went over and the guy had it open, and he was in there, and the blades were like, yay big. And he was inside there, and I went over and walked up, and then he saw me walk up there. And I wasn't in uniform yet, because I just hired in. It took me a day or 2 or 3 days to get the uniform, but I walked up, and I said, how's it going? And, he pulled back, he pulled out. And then the fan automatically kicked up, started up. It would have cut him in half. And he should have, of course, gone to where the control was for that electric going there, and he should have padlocked it in the position where it could not be turned on. And so he goofed up. So I saved his life. I saved a man's life on I didn't tell him that or anything. And he never came up to me and said, hey, you saved my life or anything. But I hired in and I thought, this is... And then sure enough, then I walked across the parking or the garage or whatever, and then I heard the supervisor there came out. An asshole too. God damn it. So he came over. Oh, Jim, And then I heard just the communications on his radio, and I thought, shit, the guys have to call in if they can move the parking cone so that it's okay to move the parking cone so the volunteers can park now, or should they wait 5 or 10 minutes and then move? And I thought, and that's the way the whole system was there. Supervisors made all the decisions, and supervisors didn't pass information on to you that they were supposed to pass on to you, because then they would, they wanted to have information that you didn't have. And it was just and then of course I got into it with the director of security, big time. And, and so I was going to quit. I thought, okay, I don't want to hire into some place and then quit, a week or a month later or something. But then they announced, well, they didn't announce it immediately as soon as I walked in the door. But I stayed long enough, and then I was thinking, okay, time to get out of this place. And then they announced they were going to build a hospital right out next to where I lived. Oh, God. So I stayed for 5 years working at the main hospital. And then I went out there and I had to file a grievance because the director of security or whatever, I could tell you the whole scenario, things that I got to tell you this one thing. It's just so the hospital's getting ready to be built. It's still going to be, it's a year or something like that away. But the director of security, he says, okay, I want to know how many of you guys want to go to Research Belton Hospital. It's going to be done in about a year. How many of you want to go? About 7 or 8, they had 25 security officers. 7 or 8 guys put their name on the list. Of course, I put my name on the list. Now, I had less seniority. I mean, I've been a security officer longer than, any of these guys. I'd already worked at 2 hospitals. And so I put my name on the list. And then okay. Well, anyway, there was a real nice supervisor there, by the way, security, and he happened to live in Raymore, where I was a reserve officer. He was really nice and good, and a good supervisor. He told me, he says, Jim, this is like a year or 2 before Research Belton Hospital was even finished. And he says, Mr. Gilmer says there's no way, he's going to make sure, no way you ever get to go to Raymore, or to Research Belton Hospital. Now, what do you think I said? What do you think I said? That goddamn fucking motherfucking son of a bitch. No, I'll fuck him up. I didn't. What did I say? I said, I'm going to trust that he does the right thing, and I'll just wait and see what happens, and I'll just trust that he's going to be an honorable. And of course, I knew, because I'm not very smart, but I am smart about some things. I did grievances, and I won. Well, at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, I did 4 or 5 grievances. I won them all against the director of security. At St. Joseph Hospital, the first hospital that I worked at, when the first security officer was shot, the hospital administrator showed up. He had to park in a parking lot. I was there, and I said, I just told you his name. There's his blood, you need to get us bulletproof vests, and you need to put a gate up between that church parking lot and this parking lot. And I forget what he said to me. And I said, and I went through, I said, there'll be another shooting. I said, it may not be a security officer, it could be a doctor, it could be a hospital employee, it could be a patient, it could be a member of the staff, it could be a nurse, it's going to happen again unless you take steps. You need to take these steps. I forget what he said. He said something that... So about a year or so later, same, I told you that, the shooting, security officers, the guy came through the church parking lot, and they both saw each other the same shot. So that, and he was a great police officer, Eugene Segan, Kansas City, Missouri police officer. That was his district, and he was a great guy. And he pulled in, and he pulled in regular when I was there, and he pulled in, and I walked over. He said, "I'm sorry to hear about your friend John." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then he was, too, he would always invite me. He said, get in the car. I never got into his car and sat down. As far as I was concerned, that was his office, and I didn't sit in his car. But anyway, he looked at me, and he knew me, because I'd had some dealings with him, and he'd helped me out a few times. Once there was a black nursing, nurse's aide or whatever, black, hard-working, black lady there. And he helped me once with, she said that her car was stolen. We never had a car stolen. and she said her car was stolen. And so, and the nursing, or the nun who was in charge of the hospital, she was really in charge. I mean, there was a hospital administrator that was, but he, she was in charge. It was a Catholic hospital. She was on the board. She was actually, it was a great hospital to work at, because every department, pharmacy, I could get a lot done. It was great. We need, we don't need religion in government, but we could use religion in, which is the way they used to be. Because, okay, the pharmacist at the hospital was a nun. She was a pharmacist. In the emergency room, they had RN, they had nurse in the emergency room was a nun. And it was that way all through the hospital. When I needed to get something done, I knew who to go to. Anyway, this employee said their car was stolen. And the nun, and she had never been this way, but there was a kind of a funny, and there used to be a magazine, Reader's Digest, and one of the things they had in there each issue was the most unforgettable character. And somebody wrote a story about the most unforgettable character, and I thought about writing it about Frank Cipolla, security officer. Because, my God, the stories are unbelievable. Anyway, oh, okay. So, I was sidetracked again, but let me get back. Security officer was shot. Second security officer was shot. The hospital administrator, he was black, by the way. Not that that matters. I don't judge people by the color of their skin, unless I. And so he pulled in his Lincoln Continental Mark IV and parked and got out of his vehicle, and I met him. And I said, "There's John Galegas's blood on the ground. Now, are you going to get a gate across this parking lot over here between the church parking lot and there? And are you going to get bulletproof vest?" And he said, "No, I don't think so, Jim. Maybe I'll get you guys a horse." Oh, by the way, that Eugene Segan, the police officer, I forgot to tell you. Let me back up a little bit. I was over there talking to, Eugene. And then he looked at me, and that's because I think I mentioned that he knew me. And he said, "Jim, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know, but I'm going to do something." He says, "I know you are." And so he was sitting there. And so then the hospital administrator pulled in. I went over, "There's John Galegas's blood. Are you going to, you're going to get a gate across here? Or are you going to get bulletproof vest?" And he laughed and said, "Maybe I'll get you guys a horse." And then he went in. And then I walked over, to Eugene. And he said, "It didn't go well, did it?" And I said, he couldn't hear us, I don't think. Maybe he could. I think he said something. "It didn't go well, did it, Jim?" And I said, "No. But I'll tell you somebody else it's not going to go well for, and that's the hospital administrator." And then a doctor pulled in. It was the hospital parking lot. The doctor's parked right there, too. And so I said, I'm going to be busy, Eugene." And he says, "Good luck." And I went up, and then every doctor that got out of the car, Dr. Piper, there's John Galegas's blood John Galegas's blood on the floor there, or the ground. I just talked to the hospital administrator and told him what we needed: bulletproof vest, gate between the church and the parking lot there. I think there was something else. And every one of the doctors, every one of those doctors, I was so proud of, those doctors. They would say different things like, uh, I'm, he says, some of them said, I'm going right away to administrative and I'm going to take care of this. Some of them said, how much does the vest cost? I said, I don't know. And the doctor said, if I have to, I'll buy them all. Different doctors said that. And they just went in there. They all went in there. Every one of those doctors. That was fucking amazing. And then there was a white guy who was the assistant administrator of the hospital, and he made me sick. Because I'd worked. That was my first hospital security job. And I had, let's see, that was, okay, that's, my wife and I, we had the tropical fish shop, we had the security patrol thing for a year or so. So that was, I didn't know anything about a suck ass, a kiss ass. And I'd been a welder, a boilermaker, I'd worked for the post office for a short period of time. And then I told them to take the job and shove it. Because I was a welder and I could quit a job on Friday and be working on Monday. But anyway, and that's probably part of the reason that I was my entire life the way that I was. And nowadays people can't, the way this situation is now. If you're a young person, you can't be like Jim Howard used to be. But anyway, the assistant administrator there at that hospital, that's, maybe I'd heard the word suck ass, kiss ass, or somebody who followed their boss around, or, and was terrified they were going to, who wanted the job, but was terrified that they wouldn't get it or something, And so anyway, he came out of the hospital. I'd never seen him come out because the black hospital administrator was inside. I never saw the assistant administrator that he wasn't right behind the hospital administrator, Do you need anything? Can I get you a water? Can I get you a Coke? Do you need your ass wiped? I'd never, my work experience and everything like that, never seen anything like that. I guess I knew it existed. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. I could never be that way, so maybe I didn't know it existed. But he came out, and then he was acting like he was going to his car. He's coming out, and I thought, okay. And then oh, Jim, by the way, I guess, I should have been why couldn't I shoot that guy? I mean, I should have been allowed to shoot that guy, shouldn't I? I had a gun, I had 38, so I only had 38, we were only allowed to carry a 38, revolver. But still, couldn't I shoot him? I should have been allowed to. Oh, Jim, I guess I don't need to go to my car. Like, I'm so fucking stupid that I think I've never seen him come out of the hospital that didn't, I said, oh. And he said, oh, Jim, by the way, we're going to put a gate across there between the church parking lot and, the parking lot there, and we're going to get bulletproof vests for you guys. And he turned around and went on inside. And so I knew my name had been circled, and I knew that I was going to quit after I made sure, and it took a while for them to get the bulletproof vest, and it might have been, because that was just about the time, I'm not sure if we got bulletproof vests before the police department, I doubt it, but that was about the same time, and I don't think any security officers in Kansas City had bulletproof vests. And okay, don't tell anybody this, but the bulletproof vests are so uncomfortable and they're so fucking hot. anyway, when I didn't leave until, I didn't quit until, and I gave a notice, 2 weeks notice, uh, that, and so finally they sent me, and that's the only time we left the property at that hospital. That's how bad it, other hospitals, like when I worked at the next hospital, there was a donut shop, Lamar's Donuts. The guy who owned it appeared on The Tonight Show. The Tonight Show. That we flew outside the United States. Anyway, that's how good his donuts were. That he appeared because his donuts were so good on The Tonight Show. But anyway, I would run over from the hospital with their patrol vehicle or whatever off the hospital property, and I would pick up donuts for the guys that I paid for and bring them back for the the guys and stuff like that. And anyway, so after anyway, we never left the hospital. That shows you how how bad the situation was there. So then I went over to apply at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, where there had just been a security officer shot who was walking to the hospital. Now it was 25 blocks west, same, but it was just west, 25 blocks. It made a difference. I mean, we had a doctor shot there, and we had stuff happen, but it made a world of difference between the hospitals. I'll tell you something. I'll tell you also. I'm not prejudiced. I never have been prejudiced. Well, until I went to Florida, and then I decided, okay, so things I thought, okay, I haven't been prejudiced. In fact, I fought, I mean, it was me against the director of security at Trinity Lutheran Hospital. He was extremely prejudiced against blacks and gypsies and stuff like that. And although I kind of liked the director of security, man, he drove me crazy. Finally, I couldn't take it. I took 5.5 years of it, and I couldn't take it anymore. And it was all arranged through him, with his help. It was all arranged. I was going to go into the biomed department I didn't go to electronics technical school or anything, but I had to get away from the director of security. I just couldn't. I had 5.5 years. It's a miracle that 5.5 years. But, I told him, like I said, I can't stand you anymore, And I said, so I'm looking for work. And he said, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna do hospital security? And I said, nope. You broke me of that idea. And he said, well, if you could do something. I said, well, I'm into computers, and I said, I've always been interested in electronics and stuff like that. And he said, well, we have a data process, or we have a biomed department here. And they did. In fact, I think it was his idea. He went to the hospital to get a biomed department, because he was always sticking his nose into it. Well, he was a smart guy. And he said, and I said, well, I didn't go to electronics school and everything, so that wouldn't work. And he said, well, go talk to so-and-so and talk to him. So I went over, and he was a real nice guy that was in charge of the biomed department. And I went over, and he interviewed me. And he says, well, Jim, I'd like to have you come to work for me. And I said, I don't have any degree or training in, electronics. And he said, well, what we need is, he said, if you've got a computer, which very few people had computers, people like us that now all have computers, And he says, we need somebody in the department. He says, you'd be perfect. He says, you've got the job, just as soon as there's an opening. He says, I'll tell Mr., that, yeah. So he told Mr. Ross, and then Mr. Ross put in when he did my merit review, he put in there, of course, every one of my merit reviews from Mr. Ross that's one reason I liked him. Oh my God. He would put stuff in there that he shouldn't put. He put in there when I think he put in my merit review that when he moved on to become a hospital assistant administrator, there were two of them, then that I should get his job as director of security. And I told him, I said, you're not moving on as to an assistant administrator. I said, you're lucky you got this job. But now he was a smart guy. Well, he didn't know how to handle people, which is funny. He was a officer in the military, and he did not know how to handle people. And I saw that, it was interesting. I mean, that whole thing was interesting. So I was all set up to go in the biomed department, and they had 3, 4, 5 of the guys were looking to get, better place, paying a little more money and everything. But I was on a committee that we reviewed the salaries we reviewed employees, what they did, and there was all kinds of questions. We had a thing that we had to go by. Now, we didn't do the 4 or 5 people that were on this committee that I was on. We didn't like enter the information to set how much an RN was going to be paid, or a respiratory therapist or something like. We did non-medical people, biomed department, but we didn't even do physical therapist or anything. Nothing medical, we did. So we did housekeeping, we did laundry, and all that type of those kind of people. And we didn't do security. And biomed, we had an idea. I think we had an idea. I had an idea of, and this is before I was, offered the job. And it was questions like a rating, of the boxes. How hot or cold is it in their job? Well, the people that work in the kitchen, it's hot and sweaty, and how much, and there was a whole bunch of questions like that you checked, and then not an organization there at the hospital, but that was sent into computers. It's because there's some company that goes around and does that kind of stuff. And so like for respiratory therapy, it was what, how much training do they need, they need or whatever, if they were to make a mistake, what could the results of that would, and questions like that. And I already knew they were paid well, and I hadn't been offered the job or anything. I hadn't applied, whatever. And they got really high rating, so there was going to be a pay raise for them. And so I think I have not totally told you everything, but you guys must be pulling your fucking hair out. I ought to have some kind of a reward I can't afford it though. I would if I could, if I had money. Of course, there's no way that I would know how long you actually stayed. There's all kinds of data. I've shown it to you myself. If you watch my videos, you've seen me go in and show you what kind of data as somebody who is doing a YouTube site, how much they have, and it's a lot of data, more than I can absorb. It's over my head or whatever. By the way, the only job in my life that I was worried about, could I do it, was the biomed job, because I was worried. I knew I could do the computer thing. I thought I could do the computer. I wasn't 100% sure that I could, do exactly what they needed stuff done. Like, they didn't tell me, but I know from watching the biomed people work. I mean, they really, they work on some big things. Now there's some things that are so big that somebody flies in from, a medical biomed person flies in from New York City or California and goes and works on the CAT scanner, or I mean, I don't know, big stuff. They make good money too, by the way. There's a car made available to them, and they stay in a nice hotel. I mean, if you're interested in biomed, of course, I'm sure it's harder now even to get into it. But let's see. Anyway, yeah, I couldn't. It was just a matter of a few weeks to go, and I would have moved in. It was in my merit review. Human Resources had agreed to it, and he knew my situation because I'd done 4 grievances about the director of security, and I actually, at some point after several years, I went to Human Resources Department and said, I don't think very many people had the guts to even do it. I mean, you didn't need guts, but I think people were afraid to do it. I went down and I said, I understand it's our right that we can see our, personnel file. And the director of Human Resources says, Jim, that's right. He says, somebody has to sit with you, And I said, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And so I opened it up, and there wasn't anything in there that I wasn't aware of. I thought that the director of security had a file on me, and he was putting stuff in, I'm sure, in that. And but that was really amazing that there wasn't anything in my file that I didn't, my merit reviews and that kind of stuff, and there wasn't anything. I was surprised and impressed. And that director of Human Resources really that leads me. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to end here because I'd like to talk about that director of Human Resources and just show you the difference in the way a person could be and the right way to do things. And I couldn't tell you any wrong ways to do things because he didn't do anything wrong. And anyway, thank you very much for watching.